The wind rolled low over the chaparral, dragging whispers of gun smoke and old blood across the borderlands. It was July in northern Mexico, and the heat wasn't just a number, it was a weight pressing down on every saddle, every breath. Cole Mercer rode alone as he always had since the war. His horse moved slow, half from exhaustion, half from the terrain that seemed to shift under hoof like some restless ghost. He hadn't meant to stop. The mission was simple: meet the Wara rebels, trade intel for a share in whatever they could steal from the French garrison at Chihuahua. Gold mostly. Some papers. Maybe redemption, though he wouldn't admit it. Not even to the wind. But as the sun angled west and shadows stretched long across the hills, he saw something that made him pull his horse up short. There, just off the trail, bound to a scorched mesquite fence post with wrists rubbed raw, was a woman. Her habit was tattered, dust-caked, the white stained red in places that told stories without needing words. She didn't scream, didn't beg, just lifted her chin when she saw him, defiant as any outlaw. He swung down and approached with caution, one hand on the butt of his revolver. "You a nun?" he asked, voice hoarse. "I was," she said. "Name's Isadora Reyes. And what exactly did you do to get tied up like cattle my brother sold me?" Her eyes didn't flinch. Said I talk too much about things the French don't like. Cole said nothing, just cut her loose. She collapsed into the dirt, then stood on her own after a moment. Stubborn. He gave her his canteen. She drank like a soldier. They didn't speak much for the first hour of walking. He offered his horse once. She declined. They made camp near a dry arroyo lined with cacti, the earth still warm from the day's brutal sun. Cole lit a fire, skinned a rattlesnake he'd found under a rock ledge, and cooked in silence, while she cleaned her scraped hands with water and strips of cloth torn from her hem. "You know," she said after a while, poking at the fire with a stick, "it's hard to believe rattlesnake could taste so good." He grinned without showing teeth. "You must be starving." "I've had worse. The French served goat's intestines once. Boiled." She shivered. "They called it cuisine." That made him laugh, a short, dry sound. "You from around here lived in Chihuahua. Taught French officers Spanish. Mother Superior said it was part of our duty." "I learned more than I should have." "Like what?" "Like there are over 200 soldiers in the garrison. A few cannons. They drink early. Guard rotations lazy. The top of the garrison wall is lower than the church roof by a full story." She looked up. "Why? That useful to you?" Cole studied her, the firelight flickering across the scar on his jaw. "Could be. Planning something." "Maybe." She stared at him hard. "Are you with the French?" He gave her a long look, then tossed her a hunk of cooked meat. "Do I look like a man who'd wear a uniform again?" She didn't answer, just chewed slowly, watching him. When the wind shifted and brought a cooler draft from the hills, Cole pulled a blanket from his saddlebag and tossed it toward her. She didn't thank him, but she wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're not like other men," she said softly, eyes on the stars. "Most would have ridden past. Maybe I should have. But you didn't." "No," he said. "I didn't." She looked at him, her face shadowed but not hidden. "Why?" He stirred the fire. "Everyone's allowed one mistake." By sunrise, the blanket was folded neatly and laid beside Cole's saddle. Isadora was already awake, brushing dust from her clothes and binding her hair beneath the remnant of her wimple. She looked less like a nun now, and more like what she truly was, a woman with nowhere left to go, yet unwilling to break. Cole didn't say anything as he handed her a dented tin cup filled with black coffee. She accepted it with a nod, her fingers steady despite the bruises. They walked north at a steady pace, the desert scrubland giving way to low canyons and sagebrush. His horse followed behind, reins dragging riderless by choice. Cole offered her the saddle again. She declined again. By noon, the sun pressed down hard and relentless. Isadora paused beneath a creosote bush, eyes narrowed. "I don't need your charity," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "You don't even want me around." "You're right," Cole said plainly, "but I don't leave folks behind, not ones like you, like me on fire inside and trying not to show it." Her lips tightened. "I told you, I just want to find the Wara. They'll protect me, and then what preach revolution, I don't need to preach it. The French are doing all the convincing themselves." They didn't talk much after that, but Cole began noticing things, small things. The way she always walked slightly behind him, never beside. The way her hand hovered near her waist like expecting a knife to be there. The way she flinched at birdsong as if it might be a rifle crack. That night they made camp near an old adobe ruin. The stars burned clear and the coyotes howled from the ridgelines. Isadora sat with her knees drawn up, whispering what sounded like prayers in Spanish. Cole didn't interrupt. Instead, he cleaned his revolver slow and methodical and finally broke the silence. "You know how to shoot?" She glanced up. "No." "Well, you're gonna learn. I don't care if you wear a cross or a crown, you walk this land unarmed. You don't walk long." "I thought you weren't planning to keep me around." "I'm not. I'm planning to get you to the Wara alive. That's different." She held his gaze, something defiant rising in her again. "And when I'm no longer useful, then you'll be free to go wherever you damn well please." You sound like someone who doesn't believe in freedom. "I believe in surviving. Freedom's a luxury." The next morning, he put a small pistol in her hand. Her grip was awkward but firm. He showed her how to aim, how to breathe. When she hit a broken bottle at 10 feet, she didn't smile. Just asked, "Can we go again?" For 3 days they traveled together, each mile a test of silence, of watching and not asking. Cole learned she slept light, like someone who'd been woken too many times by danger. Isadora learned he snored when the night was cold. They both learned to leave each other alone until the moment they couldn't. It was the 4th night under a sky streaked with lightning in the distance when they heard the riders. Cole's head snapped up. 2, maybe 3. Coming fast. Isadora's face paled. French, number worse. "Bounty men. They don't wear colors, they just follow coin. What do they want with me?" "Don't know. Don't care. Get behind that rock. If I say run, you run." She did as told. Cole crouched low, rifle braced. The riders crested the hill, 3 men dusty and drunk, their saddles hung with gear too fine to be theirs. One had a scar running from temple to jaw. Another had a flask dangling from his reins. The third youngest had a rifle but no eyes for war. "You seen a woman come through here?" the scarred man called, squinting down. "Plenty of women in the world," Cole answered. "Be more specific." "She's got a habit. Or used to." "Red hair, Spanish." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "She's got a bounty on her," the young one blurted. "French posted it, said she's a traitor." Cole didn't flinch. "Never seen her." The man with the flask sneered. "That your horse down there, mine and mine alone? You travel alone?" Cole cocked his rifle. "Usually." They stared down at each other in silence, until the scarred one grunted. "He's lying." They drew. 2 shots cracked through the canyon. One horse bucked and fled. The young man dropped his rifle and ran after it. The other 2 crumpled to the dust. Cole lowered his gun. "You can come out now." Isadora stepped from behind the rock, pale but composed. "They were after me," she said quietly. "Yeah," he said, "and next time they won't ask first." She knelt beside one of the bodies and picked up the bounty poster. Her face hardened as she read the words, "Isadora Reyes, for sedition, espionage, and collaboration with rebel forces, dead or alive." She crumpled it and tossed it into the fire. Cole didn't ask what part of it was true. Instead, he handed her back the pistol. "Better keep this close now." She nodded. Thank you for lying. Didn't lie, he said. I just didn't say the whole truth. She looked up at him, something shifting in her eyes. Cole, why are you really helping me? He didn't answer. Not yet. They kept riding north past arroyos cracked with thirst, through cactus fields humming with cicadas. After the bounty men, something had shifted. Isadora no longer walked behind Cole. She rode his horse part of the way now, no longer protesting it like some stubborn badge of pride. He let her without comment. She had begun asking questions, but not the kind that came from suspicion. These were softer, slower. Did you ever believe in anything, she asked one dusk, her voice nearly drowned by the wind. Cole didn't look at her. Just said, I used to believe in flags, and now I believe in fire, he muttered. It's honest. It burns what's weak, but it lights the way if you're strong enough to carry it. She watched him with eyes not quite judging. That sounds more like fear than faith. He didn't respond. That night they camped by a spring-fed creek, a rare kindness in the desert. Isadora took off her boots and washed the blood and road dust from her feet. Cole kept watch beneath a juniper, his rifle laid across his knees. She spoke without looking at him. The garrison, the one I told you about. It used to be a monastery. I used to walk those corridors when I was 13. It smelled of cedar and old rain. Before the French came, it was sacred. Cole nodded slowly. And after they came, they turned the chapel into a barracks, stored crates of ammunition under the altar. I once saw a man get whipped with the chain from a censer. She paused, jaw clenched. He was 15. Cole's hands tightened on the stock of his rifle. Why didn't you run? I had nowhere to go. And I thought I could change things from the inside. There was a long pause. You think they're still storing the ammo under the altar? She blinked at him. That's all you care about. I care about getting you out of this alive. No, you don't. You care about the gold, about the plan, about whether I'm useful to it. His eyes didn't waver. That too. Isadora didn't argue. She just turned and lay back on the earth, staring at the stars like they might give her answers he never would. By the time they reached the old trading post ruins at El Tejo, the heat had broken. Storm clouds gathered low over the ridges, pregnant with thunder. They took shelter beneath what was left of a collapsed adobe wall. A rusted bell still hung from a broken timber overhead, swaying faintly in the wind. Cole unpacked what little gear he had left. Isadora gathered dry brush. It had become a rhythm now, no discussion, just movement. They had learned each other's silences. As the storm rolled in, she finally asked, What happened in the States? The war? He stiffened slightly. Why do you want to know? Because you look at fire like it's something holy, and people don't do that unless they've been burned. He didn't answer at first. Then slowly, my brother was 16. Told our mother he'd follow me wherever I went. I signed up for the Union, figured he'd stay behind. But he lied. Got on a train 3 days later. Found me in Tennessee carrying a rifle too big for his arms. Her breath caught, but she didn't interrupt. We were at Franklin. The fog was thick, ground slick. I told him to stay behind the line, but when the gunfire started, I turned around and he was already running ahead. Cole paused, staring at the fire like it owed him something. Afterward, all I found was his satchel. They'd taken everything else, even his boots. Isadora didn't speak. Her eyes softened, the weight of grief familiar on her face. I came home with gold in my pocket and a medal they pinned on me for killing more men than I can count. My mother didn't look at me once. She reached out, hesitated, then rested her fingers lightly on his forearm. His name, she asked. Eli. Isadora said nothing more, just sat with him until the fire burned low and the wind began to That night they didn't sleep far apart. The earth between them was still wide but no longer a canyon. The next day they reached a ridge overlooking Chihuahua. The city shimmered in the distance, golden under the morning sun. Isadora stood with her shawl pulled tight against the wind. Cole stood beside her, binoculars raised. "There it is," she said quietly. "The church and the garrison. You sure they haven't changed anything since you left?" "They're not imaginative," she said. "Just cruel." Cole nodded, then turned to her. "If we do this," he said, "there's no turning back." Isadora looked up at him. "Was there ever?" He almost smiled. "You still wearing that cross?" he asked. She reached beneath her blouse and pulled out a small wooden pendant carved and weathered. "My mother gave it to me before she died." "You think it still means anything?" She turned the pendant over in her fingers. "It means I survived." He didn't say a word, but when he turned away, she saw him press his palm lightly against his chest where something small and old was hidden under his shirt. That night they scouted the church from a nearby hilltop. Cole sketched the layout on a scrap of hide. Isadora added notes, details only she could know. Door patterns, patrol shifts where the roof dipped enough for a clean jump. They didn't talk about what would happen if it failed. They didn't talk about what would happen if it worked. But as she placed her hand over his to still the pencil, their eyes met. And for the first time since the desert swallowed them both, they weren't strangers. The night before the raid, Cole drew lines in the dirt with a charcoal stick lit only by a flickering lantern wrapped in cloth. The flame cast warped shadows across the walls of the abandoned cantina they'd holed up in. Rain tapped steadily on the clay-tiled roof above, soft and cold. Isadora leaned over the table beside him, squinting down at the crude map of the garrison and surrounding structures. "They moved the munitions to this corner last time I was inside," she said, tapping a spot near the old chapel entrance. "If you strike here, it'll go up in seconds." Cole gave a grim nod. "You sure they're still drinking by noon on the 14th? "It's tradition now," she replied. "Even their captain gets too drunk to walk. That's not a tradition. That's God giving us a window." She glanced at him. "I thought you didn't believe in miracles." "I don't, but I believe in opportunities dressed like disasters." Their eyes locked over the map. Neither of them said what they were both thinking. If they failed, it wouldn't be the French who buried them. It'd be the silence of the land. The erasure of people who didn't matter in someone else's war. Cole straightened up, his hand resting beside hers. "The Wara expect a signal before we light the charge. Torch on the steeple, 5 seconds of flame, then smoke. That's their cue." Isadora looked at the old church drawn on the map, her voice quieter. "I was baptized there. They used to keep lilies along the aisle." He didn't respond. She sat back slowly, suddenly far away. "I used to think I'd die there too, just not like this." "You won't die," Cole said. "You can't promise that." He looked her dead in the eyes. "Then I'll die first." Silence fell heavy between them, not because it was awkward, but because there was nothing left to explain. The morning of July 14th came without ceremony. The sky hung low, humid and gray, as if holding its breath. Cole wrapped sticks of dynamite in old linen soaked in pig fat, easier to burn, faster to light. Isadora slipped into a servant's cloak, her hair tucked high beneath a woven bonnet. They rode into town separately. Isadora entered through the southern market, past the same iron gates she'd once walked through in a habit, carrying books and lessons she never believed in. Her hands shook, but her eyes stayed steady. Cole came from the east, posing as a rancher, bringing supply documents. He passed the first checkpoint with a forged badge, and the kind of scowl men didn't question. At precisely 11:30, they both stood within the same stone square separated by 50 feet and 1,000 memories. Isadora gave a nod so slight only Cole would have seen it. She disappeared through the side doors of the church. He moved toward the munitions depot. Inside the chapel, the smell of rot and smoke made her sick. Gone were the lilies, the sacred oils, the quiet. Now it was muskets stacked in place of hymnals, boots scuffing over marble. She stepped lightly, ducked into the back sacristy, and found the bundle of oilcloth Cole had stashed the night before. She lit the torch and slipped it into the lantern above the bell tower. One flicker, two, three. On the fourth it caught. Smoke curled into the sky like a prayer no one knew how to finish. Down in the square, Cole saw it. Then hell began. The blast ripped the west wall off the depot like parchment in a storm. Flame licked the sky. French soldiers screamed, some drunk, some dying. Chaos bloomed in every corner. Cole didn't wait. He stormed forward, pistol in one hand, detonator wire in the other. He didn't have to shoot many, the blast had done most of the work. He just had to get to the vault. Inside, the treasury doors gaped open, gold bars, ledgers, crates of silver, all ready to be carted to Paris. Cole didn't take a thing. He lit the second fuse, turned, and ran like hell. Back at the church, Isadora watched from the rooftop, eyes burning with wind and ash. Then a gunshot cracked from the far courtyard. She turned. Cole staggered into the open, bleeding from his side, one arm limp but still walking. She ran. Down the stairs, through fire and dust, past corpses of men she once taught to conjugate French verbs. She reached him just as he collapsed by the courtyard well. Cole. His eyes fluttered open. Did we win? She grabbed his shirt and pressed it tight to the wound. You idiot. You said you'd die first. I never said I'd let you. He coughed a laugh. Behind them, the second charge erupted. The vault disintegrated into flame. Coins rained from the sky like some broken miracle. A group of Wara fighters flooded the square, rifles raised, bandanas soaked in sweat and dirt. One of them saw Isadora, froze, then approached. Your sister Reyes. She looked up, still pressing on Cole's wound. I was. The fighter reached down and took her hand. You saved our people. No, she whispered. He did. Cole smiled faintly through the blood. Now that might count as a miracle. They left that night with only what they could carry. The gold stayed in ruins, the ledger they burned. Their names were never recorded, no medals, no songs. But as they rode together into the canyons, Cole bandaged and weak in the saddle. Isadora beside him, with her hand on his back. They had already earned something far more valuable than treasure. They had each other. They rode hard into the hills, taking mule paths known only to rebels and ghosts. Cole's wound reopened twice. By the second night, blood soaking through the bandages Isadora replaced in sins. She didn't ask if he was in pain. He didn't lie about it. Somewhere beyond the second ridge, they found shelter in a collapsed mission house, nothing but half walls and broken beams, but enough to keep off the rain. Isadora built a fire-crushed cactus pulp for salve and refused to leave his side. He drifted in and out of sleep, fevered, muttering names she didn't know. One night, just before dawn, he whispered, Eli. Wait, I didn't see you. She held his hand until the shaking stopped. By the fifth morning, he could sit upright. By the sixth, he spoke without slurring. On the seventh, he tried to stand. You'll tear the stitches, she warned. I've lived through worse. You won't live through stubbornness. He eased back down, grumbling, and for the first time in days, she smiled. That night, as the fire crackled low, she sat beside him and said, They'll come looking. The French. She nodded. Not all of them died. They'll want blood. I got no blood left to give. She looked at him. Then we run. Cole was silent for a long time. I spent most my life running. From war, from guilt, from myself. You ever get tired of it all the time, she said. He looked at her, really looked. And yet here we are. Isadora took his hand. I don't want to disappear. I want to start over, somewhere no one knows our names. That's the trick, Cole said. Gotta know who you are before you can be someone else. She brushed hair from his brow, her voice steady. I'm not a nun, not a spy, not a rebel's symbol. What are you? She swallowed. I'm yours if you'll have me. He didn't answer right away, just leaned forward, rested his forehead against hers. I've been dead inside a long time, Isadora, and now you're the first thing I've wanted to live for in years. A week later, they crossed into Arizona territory under false names. Isadora wore a wide-brimmed hat and called herself a seamstress. Cole worked cattle for a man who didn't ask questions. They rented a one-room shack by a riverbank, the kind of place no one would think to search. They kept to themselves at first. But one day when a boy from the nearby village was bit by a rattler, Isadora cleaned the wound and stayed up all night by his side. The next morning his mother brought eggs to their door. By spring, Cole was building a porch with his own hands. Isadora planted herbs near the waterline. When they talked, it wasn't about war or wounds, but about goats and roofs and whether the soil was good for squash. They never married in the eyes of the church. There were no papers, no rings. But when the neighbors asked, Cole always introduced her as his wife. And every Sunday, when the wind was soft, Isadora walked barefoot to the river, sat on the bank, and whispered prayers in Spanish, not for forgiveness, but for peace. One evening, years later, a rider came through town with a bounty notice yellowed and frayed. Isadora Reyes, traitor to the French crown, last seen with known outlaw Cole Mercer. The local sheriff laughed, crumpled it up, and said, only person with that name around here plants lavender and gives soup to old men. The rider left the next morning, and Cole and Isadora, they watched the sunrise from their porch shoulders, touching hearts still soft from a lifetime of choosing each other over fear, over silence, over history. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come with trumpets or medals. Sometimes it just looks like two hands in the dirt, rebuilding something worth calling home. Years passed like dust on the wind, slow at first, then all at once. The scars faded, though some deeper ones never did. Cole still winced on cold mornings when the wound in his side flared, and Isadora still woke some nights in a sweat, when thunder sounded too much like cannon fire. But they were no longer haunted by what had been, only shaped by it. Their home was not grand. A one-room cabin, patched roof, a crooked fence that leaned with the seasons. But it held laughter now, the smell of bread and sweat and slow dancing under oil lamps. It held things neither of them thought they'd ever find again, safety, silence that wasn't terrifying, and love that asked nothing but presence. Cole built a second chair for the porch, even though he swore he didn't care for sitting still. Isadora planted wildflowers where the rocks used to be, coaxing color from the earth, like she was undoing history one root at a time. They didn't talk much about the past. When they did, it was in small pieces, a name here, a smell there, not as burdens, but as markers of how far they'd come. Some evenings, Cole would catch her looking east toward the ridge where the sun always broke first. What are you thinking about, he'd ask, and she'd smile, not at the memory of war or blood, but at the miracle of the moment. That I made it out, she'd say, that you didn't leave. He'd nod and reach for her hand. Not this time. Their life wasn't marked by legacy. There were no books written, no statues carved, no songs sung in cantinas. But those who passed through their porch, the widows, the runaways, the men with no more fight left in them, left different than when they arrived. A hot meal, a dry cot, a place to rest and remember they were still human. And that perhaps was the quietest kind of redemption. Because in a world that had burned so much of them away, Cole and Isadora chose to be something else, something whole. They didn't forget the war. They just chose to build something beyond it. And in the end, maybe that's all any of us can do. In a world that often defines people by their scars, their losses, their failures, their guilt, the story of Cole and Isadora reminds us that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing what to carry forward. They were both shaped by war, betrayal, and broken faith, one a man who stopped believing in anything but survival, the other a woman who had every reason to hate and disappear. But instead of letting the fire consume them, they used its light to find each other, to build something humble but real. The truth is, we don't get to rewrite our histories, but we do get to decide what comes next. We get to choose love over isolation, kindness over vengeance, and building over burning. Sometimes redemption doesn't come through grand gestures. It comes through small, steady acts, boiling water, fixing fences, holding a hand through the night. And in a world that moves too fast and forgets too quickly, that kind of quiet courage. That's the truest kind of miracle. So wherever you are, whether you're still running, still hurting, or just trying to believe again, remember this: you are more than what hurt you. You are what you choose to keep. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that even the most weathered souls deserve a second chance, then Frontier Reverie is where you belong. Here we tell stories that rise from the dust, stories where love grows in silence. And healing comes not from forgetting, but from choosing each other again and again. Subscribe to Frontier Reverie and ride with us through tales of redemption, resilience, and the kind of quiet courage that built the West and still builds us today, because out here, no one's too far gone.